Rain soaked through silk and skin alike. It dripped from my lash, slid down my jaw, and tasted faintly metallic when it touched my lips. Blood. Not mine, not yet, but it would be, if the story continued the way it was meant to. I was kneeling in the palace courtyard, fingers clenched in the mud-streaked hem of a black military coat. Across from me stood the protagonist of the novel, a Leon Ashvid, pale, trembling, luminous in a way only main characters were allowed to be. His silver hair clung to his cheeks, his wide eyes shimmering with wounded innocence, and towering between us stood the alpha I was supposedly obsessed with, Cassian Ardent. War hero, duke, future ruler, the man the Villainomega loved so desperately that he ruined himself trying to possess him. My name in this world was Lucien Vale, and Lucien was meant to die tonight. I warned you, Cassian said, his voice calm but edged with finality. Even in the rain, his scent pressed heavy in the air, cedarwood and iron, dominant and unyielding. It coiled around me instinctively, a reminder of what I was in this world. An Omega, a Villainomega. In the novel, this was the scene where Lucien broke, where he screamed about betrayal, where he lunged at a Leon in hysterical jealousy, where Cassian's guard struck him down, and he bled into the stone like a cautionary tale. I remembered the comments I'd read when I had finished the book. He got what he deserved. Villains don't get happy endings. Pathetic Omega. The humiliation burned hotter than the cold rain. Except, I wasn't Lucien. Or maybe I was, but not the one written by someone else. My grip on Cassian's coat loosened. His golden eyes flickered down at me, faint surprise breaking through his usual composure. A Leon has always been your choice, I said quietly. The courtyard went still. Even the guards seemed to hesitate. That wasn't in the script. Lucien was supposed to beg. I slowly rose to my feet. The movement felt unreal, like stepping off the edge of a page and into blank space. I misjudged my place, I continued, smoothing my soaked sleeves. I won't interfere again. A Leon blinked. Oh, Lucien. Cassian's brows drew together. What are you doing? Ending it, I thought. Not my life. The story. I met Cassian's gaze fully for the first time. He was striking rain darkening his hair, jaw set with restrained authority. In the novel, Lucien worshipped him. I saw something else. A man who expected to be chaste. A man accustomed to devotion. I release you, I said calmly. His expression shifted, not relief, not triumph. Confusion. That isn't necessary, he replied. It is for me. The words surprised even me, but they felt right, solid. In the original story, Lucien's entire identity revolved around Cassian. His schemes, his cruelty, his downfall, all driven by desperate love. But if I removed that desperation, what was left? Wealth, influence, intelligence, a powerful family name. Lucien wasn't weak. He was written to be. The rain intensified, thunder rolling overhead. Cassian stepped forward slightly. Lucien. The way he said my name, lower, sharper, almost sounded like a warning, or a question. For a fleeting second, instinct screamed at me to fall back to my knees, to cling, to cry, to follow the script that guaranteed emotional intensity, even if it ended in death. But I had already died once in my own world. I refused to die again for someone else's narrative. I bowed, not submissively, not broken. I wish you happiness, Duke Ardent. Then I turned. Gasps followed me as I walked away from the courtyard, from Cassian, from the fate that had been written in blood and tragedy. No guard stopped me. No blade pierced my back. The storm swallowed the silence. Behind me, I felt at Cassian's gaze, sharp and unsettled. In the novel, this was the night the Villainomega died. Instead, it was the night he chose to live. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the rain and fear and unfamiliar instincts of this borrowed body, something shifted. If this world insisted on calling me a villain, fine, but I would not be a tragic one. This time, I would steal my own ending. I did not die. That alone changed everything. By morning, the capital was buzzing. Servants whispered in corridors. Nobles sent subtle inquiries. A few bold socialites even requested tea invitations under the guise of checking on my well-being. Translation: why are you still alive? In the original novel, Lucien Vale's social downfall began immediately after the rain-soaked confrontation. Cassian distanced himself publicly. Allies withdrew. The gossip turned vicious. But that only worked because Lucien reacted. He raged. He schemed recklessly. He tried to sabotage Leon in broad daylight. He made himself easy to destroy. I sat at the long oak desk in my private study, reviewing account ledgers instead. The Vale estate was enormous. 3 trade routes running through the western provinces. To shipping ports. Agricultural contracts supplying grain to half the capital. And that wasn't even touching the political leverage. Lucien hadn't been weak. He'd been emotionally bankrupt. A soft knock sounded. "My lord," my steward said carefully, stepping inside. "There are inquiries from the Ashford household and the Ardent estate." "Of course." I closed the ledger slowly, respond politely. "Inform them I am resting after last night's embarrassment." The steward hesitated. "You do not wish to meet the Duke?" "Not yet." Curiosity was a more powerful hook than obsession. "Not today," I said calmly. He bowed and left. Alone again, I leaned back in the chair and exhaled. The Omega instincts in this body were inconvenient. Even thinking about Cassian made my pulse shift slightly, scent glands warming under my skin. This body remembered him, craved him, but I wasn't this body, and I would not let instinct dictate strategy. A week passed. I declined invitations, sent gifts instead, attended council meetings with perfect composure, spoke little, observed everything. People didn't know what to do with a quiet villain. The first crack came at a public trade negotiation. I was midway through outlining revised port tariffs when the doors opened. Heavy boots, measured steps. I didn't look up immediately. I didn't need to. The room's atmosphere shifted. Alpha presence, commanding, controlled, familiar. Cassian Ardent took a seat across from me at the council table. He didn't announce himself. He didn't greet anyone. He simply watched. I finished speaking without faltering. Only when the council dismissed did I finally meet his gaze. Golden eyes. Assessing. "You've been avoiding me," he said evenly. "I've been busy." "With what?" "Running my estate." A flicker of something passed through his expression. Annoyance. Interest. "You nearly caused a scandal last week," he continued. "Now you behave as if nothing happened." I folded my hands on the table. "Would you prefer hysterics?" His jaw tightened slightly. "No." "Then we are both satisfied." Silence stretched between us. In the novel, Cassian barely tolerated Lucien's presence after rejecting him. Now, he was the one who came to me. "You're different," he said finally. "That tends to happen when someone nearly dies." His gaze sharpened. "You weren't in danger." Oh, that was fascinating. In the book, he hadn't cared whether Lucien lived or died. But last night, he hadn't given the order. I tilted my head slightly, weren't I? A beat. His scent shifted subtly, deeper, warmer, not aggression. Focus. "I don't like unpredictability," Cassian said. I allowed myself the faintest smile. "Then you may wish to stop visiting villains." For a long moment, he simply looked at me, not with disdain, not with pity, with curiosity. Dangerous. Because hatred pushes a man away, curiosity pulls him closer. And when Cassian finally rose to leave, he did something that was not in the original story at all. He said, quietly, "Don't disappear again." Not a command, not quite a request, but something close to both. And for the first time since arriving in this world, I understood something very clearly. I had not just survived the death scene. I had disrupted the entire narrative. And Cassian Ardent, the alpha who was never supposed to look back, was watching me now. Cassian Ardent did not visit twice by accident. The second time he came to the Vale estate, he did not send a formal request. He arrived just before dusk, when the sky burned amber and the servants were lighting the chandeliers. I was informed only moments before he stepped into my drawing room. He dismissed the attendants with a single glance. Alpha. Authority without effort. I set aside the document I'd been reviewing and rose smoothly. Duke Ardent. Lord Vale. He did not sit immediately. Instead, he studied me opally, unapologetically, as if searching for cracks in porcelain. "You've been productive," he said at last. "I usually am. In the past, your productivity centered around me." Blunt. I appreciated that. "And now?" I asked calmly. His gaze lingered on my face a second too long. "Now it doesn't." I gestured toward the seating area. "Would you like tea, or did you come solely to audit my personality?" A faint shift in his expression, almost amusement. He said, "Progress." The tea was poured. The air between us remained charged but controlled. Outside, the wind stirred the garden trees. Inside, the firelight cast gold against his sharp features. "I reviewed the new port proposals," he said, finally getting to the point. "They're bold. They're profitable. They favor the Vale estate heavily. They strengthen the western provinces, which strengthens the crown." He watched me closely. "You speak like a strategist." "I always was one." "No," he said quietly. "You weren't." Ah, there it was, the difference. In the novel, Lucien's intelligence was always overshadowed by his obsession. He made reckless moves to get Cassian's attention. He sacrificed long-term power for short-term proximity. I leaned back slightly. "Perhaps you never paid attention." His jaw tightened. For a split second, the temperature in the room dropped. Cassian Ardent was not accustomed to being challenged. You think I misjudged you? He asked. I replied evenly, you saw what was convenient. Silence, the kind that tests dominance. The omega instincts in this body prickled, aware of his presence, aware of the subtle pressure in the air. But I didn't lower my gaze. If this was going to become a game, I refused to start beneath him. Cassian's scent shifted again, not sharp enough for aggression, not warm enough for comfort. Intrigued, you released me, he said suddenly. Yes. Why? Because loving you the way Lucien did would have destroyed me. Because I refused to die for someone else's plot. Because walking away was the only way to survive. Instead, I said, because I respect myself. The words hung between us. Something in his expression changed, subtle, but real. You think I didn't respect you? He asked. I think you didn't need to. That landed. His fingers tapped once against the arm of the chair. A contained reaction. And now, he pressed. Now, I said calmly, you're here. That was the truth. He was the one crossing distances. He was the one initiating meetings. He was the one unsettled. Cassian leaned forward slightly. Do you know what I dislike most about this? He asked. Enlighten me. I don't know what you want anymore. There it was. Control. He didn't like losing the ability to predict me. I want stability for my estate, I said smoothly. Political strength. Influence. That's not what I meant. Of course it wasn't. I held his gaze. What you're asking, I said softly, is whether I still want you. The air thickened. His pulse, steady, discipline did not falter, but his eyes darkened. And do you? He asked. In the original novel, Lucien would have answered instantly, desperately. Now, I allowed the silence to stretch. I don't chase what doesn't choose me, I said at last. Not a confession, not a denial, a boundary. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Cassian stood. When he stepped closer, it wasn't to intimidate. It was to close the distance. He stopped just short of touching me. You're playing a dangerous game, he murmured. I tilted my head slightly. Only if someone loses. His gaze dropped briefly to my lips, then back to my eyes. I don't lose, he said. A faint smile curved my mouth. Neither do I. For the first time since I arrived in this world, I saw it clearly. This wasn't obsession anymore. It was tension. Mutual, balanced. And as Cassian turned to leave, pausing only long enough to say, I'll return in 3 days, I realized something else. The narrative hadn't just shifted. It was unraveling. And we were no longer villain and hero. We were opponents, equals, and perhaps something far more dangerous. The invitation arrived sealed in pale silver wax, Ashford crest, delicate, elegant, intentionally unthreatening. Alien wished to see me. In the novel, this was where Lucien lost control for the second time. He insulted Alien publicly at a garden luncheon, accused him of seducing Cassian, threw wine across pristine white silk and sealed his reputation as cruel, jealous, unstable. It was a beautifully written downfall. I dressed carefully, not extravagantly, not provocatively. Soft gray silk, minimal jewelry, composed. If I was going to meet the story's protagonist, I would do it without theatrics. The Ashford estate gardens were exactly as I remembered from the book. White roses climbing trellises, marble fountains whispering in the afternoon sun, servants moving like shadows. Alien was seated beneath a flowering arch. He looked exactly like a main character should. Silver hair, gentle posture, eyes that carried permanent vulnerability. He stood when I approached. Lord Vale, he greeted softly. Lord Ashford, polite, measured. We sat across from one another. Tea was poured. Silence lingered just long enough to become intentional. You've changed, Alien said finally. I didn't smile, so I've been told. His fingers tightened slightly around his teacup. You frightened me that night, he admitted. I thought you would. Attack you, I supplied calmly. His silence was answer enough. In the original narrative, I thought I would have. Instead, I lifted my cup. I have no intention of harming you. His brows drew together faintly. Then why release him? Straight to the point. I appreciated that. Because love cannot be negotiated, I replied. Alien's expression faltered. You loved him, he said quietly. The way he said it wasn't cruel. It was curious, as if he genuinely couldn't understand how someone could let go. Yes, I answered. Not a lie. Lucien had loved Cassian, desperately. That doesn't vanish overnight. No, I agreed. It doesn't. The breeze shifted, carrying the faint scent of blooming roses. And yet, Alien pressed gently, you stepped away. I did. Why? Because I refused to die for someone who didn't choose me. Because I am not your cautionary tale. Because I deserve more than scraps of affection. Instead, I met his gaze calmly. Because I value myself. That startled him. In the novel, Lucien had none of that. No restraint, no dignity, just obsession. Elian studied me carefully now, as if seeing a stranger. "You're not plotting something?" he asked quietly. There it was, the fear, the expectation. Villains don't reform. Villains scheme. I set my cup down gently. "If I intended to destroy you," I said evenly, "I would not announce it over tea." A flicker of something crossed his face, not relief. "Respect. You don't hate me?" he asked. That question lingered longer than the others. Did I? He was never my enemy. He was simply written to win. "I don't," I said honestly. And I didn't. My battle was never with him. It was with fate. Elian exhaled slowly. "Cassian has been distant," he murmured. "Interesting. From you?" I asked. He hesitated. "He's distracted." "Ah, so the narrative trembles." I tilted my head slightly. "That concerns you?" "Yes." "Honest. Good. Then you should ask him about it," I replied calmly. Elian's gaze sharpened faintly. "You're very confident." "I'm very tired of chaos." The truth again. Silence settled between us, not hostile, but charged with realization. For the first time, I saw it clearly in his eyes. I was no longer predictable. No longer the villain who existed solely to threaten his happiness. I was something else. A variable. When I rose to leave, Elian spoke once more. "If he chooses you," he said quietly, "what will you do?" I paused, turned slightly. "If he chooses me," I said, voice steady, "then it will be his choice. Not manipulation, not desperation. Choice." As I walked back through the Ashwood Gardens, I felt it again. The shift in the world around me. The original story depended on my aggression, on my jealousy, on my downfall. Without that, everything destabilized. And somewhere in the capital, I knew Cassian Ardent could feel it too. The villain was no longer attacking, which meant he would have to decide whether to walk away or step closer. The first rumor reached me at noon. The second arrived before dusk. By evening, the entire capital had decided that Duke Cassian Ardent was visiting the Vale estate too frequently for it to be coincidence. How predictable. Society needed patterns, needed villains, needed romance framed neatly in rivalry. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't chasing him anymore. He was coming of his own accord. I was reviewing shipping manifests when the doors to my study opened without announcement. Only one person in this kingdom dared. "You've grown comfortable," I said without looking up. Heavy boots crossed the carpet. I disliked waiting outside doors. Cassian's voice carried that same controlled authority, the kind that made servants straighten and nobles swallow their protests. I signed the final document before lifting my gaze. He was dressed in dark uniform today. No ceremonial cape, no public mask. This wasn't a political visit. "Is there a crisis?" I asked mildly. "Yes." I arched a brow. "The capital believes you've reclaimed your obsession," he continued evenly. "They believe I've entertained it." "And have you?" His jaw tightened slightly. I closed the ledger and rose. The space between us felt narrower than usual. "Charged. You were at the Ashford estate," he said. "T. You spoke with Elian." "Yes." "And what?" His golden eyes sharpened. "What game are you playing, Lucien?" There it was again. That edge. Not anger. Not quite. Possessiveness wrapped in irritation. I stepped around the desk slowly. "If I were playing a game," I said calmly, "you would not know." His scent flared faintly, heat under steel. "You walked away from me," he said. "I did." "You refuse invitations." "Yes." "You claim indifference." "I claim dignity." That landed harder than anything else. He took a step closer. Not enough to touch. Enough to loom. Most Omegas would instinctively lower their gaze. My body reacted. Pulse quickening. Instincts whispering submission. But I kept my chin level. "If you intend to rekindle the spectacle," he said quietly, "end it now." "Rekindle," I repeated softly. "You embarrassed yourself once. I will not allow you to do it again." Ah, so that was it. Control. He thought I might spiral again, that I might ruin myself publicly for the sake of love. I held his gaze steadily. "I am not the one visiting unannounced," I said. Silence. The air tightened. Cassian's eyes darkened. "You think this is pursuit?" he asked. I replied, "you dislike not knowing your place in my life." That was the provocation. Intentional. Measured. His breathing shifted barely perceptible. "But there, you've removed me from the center," he said. "Yes. And you expect me not to notice." "I expect nothing from you." Another step. Now there was less than a breath between us. The warmth of him pressed against my senses. Dominant alpha presence, steady and overwhelming. My body betrayed me with a flicker of heat beneath my skin. He noticed. Of course he did. His gaze dipped briefly to my throat. "You still react," he murmured. "So do you." That made his eyes snap back to mine. His scent had deepened. Thicker. Richer. Focused entirely on me. I tilted my head slightly. You came here angry, I observed. But you haven't left. A muscle in his jaw flexed. I don't like uncertainty. Then don't create it. His hand lifted suddenly, not rough, not forceful, but firm as his fingers brushed just beneath my chin. Not lifting, not forcing, testing. My pulse thudded in my ears. You are provoking me, he said quietly. Yes. Why? Because if he stepped closer, it would be because he chose to. Because I refuse to beg. Because I need to know whether his attention is instinct or intention. Because, I said softly, meeting his gaze without flinching, I want to see how far you're willing to come. The words settled between us like a challenge thrown at his feet. Cassian's thumb brushed, almost absently, against the line of my jaw. Not claiming. Not yet. His voice dropped lower. You are dangerous like this. I smiled faintly. I was always dangerous. The difference now, I wasn't desperate. And for the first time, I saw it clearly in his eyes. He was no longer certain who held the advantage. It hit me in the middle of the night. A sudden, overwhelming heat, a pulling ache that twisted through my chest and legs. My body remembered what I had not, what Lucien had always tried to suppress. Panic clawed at me for a moment. In the original story, this would have been a public humiliation, a mark of weakness used against me to showcase the Villainomega's desperation. Not this time. I locked myself in the private guest wing, away from servants and prying eyes. The room smelled faintly of cedar from the estate's shelves, and I clutched a pillow to my chest as if it could anchor me. I had survived death once. I would survive this too. A knock echoed against the door. Lucien, Cassian's voice, calm, firm, undeterred by the weather or my isolation. I froze. No, I called softly. Go away. You shouldn't be here. I can smell you from the gate, he replied. His tone was not harsh. It was precise, controlled. But there was that underlying alpha insistence that made every instinct in this body flare. Let me in. I hesitated. The heat made me vulnerable in ways I hadn't anticipated. But the thought of him outside, watching, waiting, that was dangerous too. I relented and opened the door slightly. Cassian stepped in without invitation. The scent of his presence filled the room. Leather, cedar, and the faint hint of firewood. He moved carefully, hands empty, yet deliberate. You won't claim me out of pity, I whispered, words coated with both challenge and fear. He stopped, just a step from me. His eyes, golden, unyielding, steadied mine. I would only claim what chooses me, he said. That simple declaration made my pulse stutter. Not domination, not coercion, just acknowledgement, respect, patience, choice. I studied him cautiously. And then, in the way an Omega can only feel when truly alone with an Alpha, I realized the danger. I wanted this, wanted him here, wanted the tension to linger without crossing the line. Cassian stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. His hand hovered near mine, not touching yet, testing boundaries. You are mine, he murmured softly, if you allow it. I inhaled sharply, not fear, not surrender, recognition. I wanted to say no, to retreat, to assert my independence. But part of me, the part that was Lucien, the part that had spent a lifetime being written as desperate and pathetic, wanted to test the Alpha's persistence. I started, voice low, I will allow what I choose. Cassian's lips curved slightly. Approval, not triumph. For the first time, I felt the intoxicating power of my own decision, not the script's desperation, not the doomed villain's collapse. I was the Omega, I was the villain, but I was in control. And the Alpha who refused to leave me alone was learning that this time, I would dictate the terms. Morning light filtered through gauze curtains, pale and almost innocent. Nothing about last night had been innocent. I stood before the tall mirror in my chambers, fingers brushing lightly over the unmarked skin at my throat. No bite, no claiming seal, no irreversible decision made in the haze of heat. Cassian had left before dawn, not because he was dismissed, because I asked him to, and he obeyed. That fact settled deep in my chest like something warm and dangerous. A knock sounded at the outer door. Enter. My steward stepped inside, carefully neutral. The Duke has requested a joint appearance at this afternoon's council session. Joint. Interesting. Has it been announced publicly? I asked. Yes, my lord. So this was deliberate. Cassian was not a man who moved without calculation. If he wanted the capital watching us side by side, then he understood exactly what message it would send. I dressed accordingly. Not soft, not vulnerable. Deep wine-colored silk with structured shoulders. Silver cuff rings. My hair tied back neatly to expose my throat, unmarked, visible. Let them see. When I arrived at the council chamber, conversation dipped into whispers. Cassian was already seated at the head of the long table. He did not rise when I entered. but his gaze tracked me with unmistakable focus. I took the seat at his right, not across, not beneath, beside. A murmur rippled through the nobles. Territorial lines were being redrawn in real time. The session began with border disputes and supply allocations. I spoke when necessary, precise and controlled. Cassian did not interrupt me once. When I proposed a revision to military transport routes through Vale territory, he supported it without hesitation. That was new. In the novel, he publicly corrected Lucien often, subtle humiliations masked as leadership. Now, he reinforced me. After the session ended, the nobles filtered out slowly, eyes sharp with speculation. Cassian remained seated. "So," he said quietly once we were alone, "you chose distance." I met his gaze. "I chose clarity." "You asked me to leave." "Yes." "You were in heat, and still capable of decision." His jaw tightened slightly. "I could have stayed. You could have." A beat of silence. "You wanted me to," he said. Not a question. Observation. "Yes," I admitted calmly. The honesty startled him. "But wanting is not surrender," I continued. "If you stay, it will never be because instinct demanded it." His golden eyes darkened. "And if I want to stay?" he asked. "Then you will say so." The air shifted. Not aggressive, not volatile, heavy with understanding. He rose slowly from his seat and stepped closer. "I do not pursue lightly," he said. "When I decide something is mine, I commit." There it was again. Possession. Not cruel, not careless, but firm. I held his gaze steadily. "And what have you decided?" He stopped an arm's length away. "I haven't," he said quietly. "Not fully." That surprised me. "You're cautious," I observed. "I'm strategic." "So am I." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Yes, you are." For a long moment, we simply stood there. "I won't be your rebellion," I said finally. "And I won't be your experiment." "You're neither." "Then what am I?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out, slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed his fingers against my wrist. The contact was light, intentional. "You are the only Omega who has ever walked away from me," he said. "And that unsettles you." "Yes." Honest again. "Good." I stepped closer this time, closing the remaining space. "Then decide, Cassian," I said softly. "Not because I reacted to you. Not because I provoked you. Not because the capital is whispering." His gaze dropped briefly to my lips before lifting again. "Decide because you want me." Silence fell heavy between us. Then, quietly, firmly, "I do." The words were not loud. They didn't need to be. For the first time, it wasn't instinct speaking. Not pride. Not power. Choice. And when his hand slid from my wrist to my waist, steady, possessive, but not forceful, I didn't step back. I stepped closer. This was no longer about rewriting fate. It was about writing something entirely new. And this time, the Alpha was choosing. By the next morning, the capital had decided we were either engaged or at war. There was no middle ground in high society. Cassian did not announce anything official. He didn't need to. The way he looked at me during council had already rewritten weeks of gossip. Still, rumors were smoke. Smoke could be shaped. The Royal Autumn Banquet arrived 3 days later, the kind of event where alliances were forged over wine and destroyed over smiles. In the original novel, this was the scene where Lucien humiliated himself again. He clung to Cassian's arm while Leon stood radiant at the Duke's side. A whispered insult here, a careless outburst there, reputation ruined beyond repair. Tonight would be different. I arrived alone. That was intentional. Deep midnight blue silk, cut sharply, silver embroidery at the collar, no scent enhancers, no subtle tricks to draw an Alpha's attention. If Cassian looked at me, it would be because he wanted to. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and polished marble. Music drifted through the air, soft and calculated. Eyes followed me, curious, waiting. Then the doors at the far end opened. Cassian entered. Military formal attire, black and gold, composed, untouchable. He scanned the room once. His gaze found me almost immediately. It did not move away. There was no dramatic crossing of the floor, no theatrical claiming. Instead, he greeted officials, spoke with council members, accepted bows. Every few moments, his attention returned to me. Measured, deliberate. I spoke with merchants from the western provinces, discussing tariffs and naval security. I did not glance toward him once. Let him cross the distance. Halfway through the evening, a minor lord bold in wine and stupidity approached me. "Lord Vale," he said too loudly, "I'm surprised to see you standing alone tonight." "I enjoy my own company," I replied smoothly. A few nobles nearby leaned in subtly. "And the Duke," he pressed, smirking faintly. "Has he tired of chasing you already?" Ah, there it was. The bait. In the novel, Lucien would have snapped, turned defensive, made it obvious that Cassian's attention was oxygen to him. I smiled instead. The Duke chases nothing, I said calmly. He walks where he chooses. A shadow fell across us. The minor lord's smirk faltered. Cassian had arrived. I don't recall chasing, Cassian said evenly. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. The minor lord bowed stiffly and retreated almost immediately. Cassian's attention shifted to me. You handle provocation well, he observed. I've had practice. His gaze dipped briefly to my throat again. Unmarked. Still, you came alone, he said. Yes, you could have requested my escort. I don't request what isn't offered. The music swelled slightly as couples began moving toward the center of the ballroom. Cassian extended his hand, not commanding, not hesitant. A simple, clear offer. The entire room noticed. If I took it, there would be no retreat from speculation. If I refused, I would re-establish distance. Choice. Always choice. I placed my hand in his. A ripple passed through the watching crowd. His grip was firm but controlled as he guided me to the dance floor. His palm rested at my waist, secure, unmistakably possessive. You understand what this does, he murmured as we moved. Yes. And you still agreed. Yes. His thumb pressed slightly into the fabric at my hip. A reminder. A claim without a mark. You're not subtle, I said softly. I don't intend to be. The dance was slow, deliberate. His movements precise. Mine matched. We were not lovers yet. Not officially. But we were no longer pretending distance. Are you declaring territory? I asked quietly. I am making my position clear. And what position is that? His gaze locked onto mine. That you are not available for public speculation. Heat flickered under my skin. That sounds dangerously close to claiming. It is not a claim, he replied. Not until you allow it. The distinction mattered. When the music ended, he did not release me immediately. Instead, he leaned closer, close enough that only I could hear him. You wanted me to decide, he said. Yes, I have. The room held its breath around us, and for the first time, I realized something crucial. This wasn't about seduction anymore. This was strategy, public territory drawn carefully. The Villainomega was no longer scrambling for attention. He was being chosen in full view of the kingdom, and Cassian Ardent was making sure everyone understood it. The backlash began quietly. It always did. A missed invitation here. A delayed shipment approval there. A subtle shift in tone during council meetings. Smiles that lingered half a second too long. The capital did not accept change easily, especially not when that change involved the former villain standing beside the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. By the third day after the banquet, I received confirmation. 2 Western trade vessels had been randomly selected for inspection and detained at the northern docks. Random. Of course. I set the report down slowly. They're testing you, my steward said carefully. No, I corrected. They're testing him. If I retaliated emotionally, it would confirm every suspicion. If Cassian intervened directly, it would look like favoritism, which meant I needed to win this myself. I requested an emergency council session, not through Cassian, through official channels. When I entered the chamber, the atmosphere was noticeably colder. Lord Henrik, the same minor noble who had baited me at the banquet, sat too comfortably at the far end of the table. There seems to be confusion regarding inspection protocols, I began calmly, laying out the documents. The Vale trade fleet has met every compliance standard for the past decade. A murmur. Henrik leaned forward. Routine security measures should not offend you, Lord Vale. I'm not offended, I replied evenly. I'm calculating the financial damage of inefficiency. A few council members shifted. I continued, precise and unhurried. The delay has already disrupted grain distribution to 3 provinces. If shortages occur, public unrest will follow. I assumed that was not the intention. Silence, because now it wasn't about me. It was about stability. Henrik's jaw tightened. Surely the Duke can compensate for minor losses, he said lightly. Ah, there it was, the implication. That I relied on Cassian's protection. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the chamber. The Duke does not compensate for incompetence. Cassian. He had not announced his arrival. He rarely did. The room straightened instantly. He did not look at me. Not yet. His gaze fixed on Henrik. Inspection orders require council majority. Cassian continued evenly. Records show no formal vote. Henrik paled slightly. It was a precaution. It wasn't authorized, Cassian corrected. The tension in the room sharpened. This was delicate. If Cassian crushed him outright, it would reinforce dependency. So I stepped in. The Duke is correct regarding procedure, I said smoothly. However, I am not requesting punishment. Several heads turned. I am requesting transparency. Henrik blinked. Transparency. Yes, I replied calmly. Open inspection. publicly recorded, with council observers present. If my fleet fails compliance, I will accept sanctions without protest. That was the countermove. Confidence without defensiveness. Cassian's gaze shifted to me, then measured, approving. Henrik hesitated. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected outrage. Or reliance. Very well, Henrik said stiffly. Excellent, I replied, already knowing the outcome. My fleet was clean. The session adjourned shortly after. As the chamber emptied, Cassian approached me quietly. You didn't need my presence, he said. No, I agreed, but I don't mind it. His eyes darkened slightly. You handled that precisely. They wanted to provoke insecurity, I said. They got structure instead. He stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that his presence wrapped around me like heat beneath steel. You're enjoying this, he observed. Yes. His lips curved faintly. They'll escalate. I know. And if they target you directly. I met his gaze steadily. Then I will counter directly. A pause. And if they target you through me? He asked softly. There it was. The real concern. I considered it carefully. Then you'll have to decide whether I'm worth the inconvenience. His expression hardened, not in anger, in certainty. You already know the answer to that. Heat flickered low in my stomach. Confidence was dangerous when it came from a man like him. I prefer proof over implication, I said lightly. He stepped even closer then, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You'll have it. A promise. Not theatrical, not loud, but absolute. As he walked away, I felt it clearly. This was no longer just tension or attraction. It was alliance. Strategic. Personal. Unavoidable. The capital had made its first move against me. I had countered, and Cassian Ardent had chosen to stand where the line was drawn. Not in front of me, not above me, but beside me. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous shift of all. The inspection ended exactly as I expected. Clean, public, embarrassing for the people who tried to sabotage me. By evening, word had spread across the capital. The Vale fleet was compliant. The accusations were baseless. The delay had been political theater, which meant the next move wouldn't be about trade. It would be about me. The invitation from Cassian arrived an hour later. Private dinner. No guests. That alone made my pulse shift. When I arrived at the Ardent estate, the atmosphere felt different. Not formal. Not ceremonial. Quiet. He was waiting in a smaller dining room. Not the grand hall. No long table separating us. Just a modest setting for two. You didn't have to come, he said when I entered. I know. We held each other's gaze a moment too long. Dinner was served and dismissed quickly. Neither of us ate much. This wasn't about food. They'll escalate, he said eventually. Yes, you're aware the rumors will change now. They always do. He leaned back slightly in his chair, studying me in that measured way of his. You handled today well. I handled it the way anyone competent would. You're not just competent. I raised a brow. Careful. That earned the smallest hint of a smile. Silence settled again. Not awkward. Just heavy with things neither of us had said yet. Finally, he stood. I felt the shift immediately. Not dominance. Decision. He moved around the table slowly and stopped in front of me. You asked me to decide, he said. Yes, I have. My heart didn't race. It steadied. And, I asked quietly. His hand lifted, slow enough that I could step back if I wanted. His fingers brushed just beneath my ear, warm against my skin. I don't like half measures, he said. I've noticed. I don't mark out of impulse. Good. His thumb traced the line of my throat lightly. Not possessive yet just present. If I do this, he continued, it won't be because you challenged me. Then why? His gaze softened slightly, something rare and unguarded. Because I don't want a future that doesn't include you. That landed harder than any declaration of territory. Not pride. Not conquest. Future. You're aware, I said carefully, that marking me changes more than gossip. I know. You bind yourself too. I know. And if this goes wrong, his hand stilled. Then it goes wrong with honesty. I studied him closely. In the novel, this moment had been desperate. Lucien throwing himself at a man who felt obligated more than devoted. This didn't feel like obligation. It felt steady. I won't be marked just to quiet the capital, I said softly. I wouldn't insult you like that. I won't be marked because I walked away and bruised your pride. A faint exhale left him. You didn't bruise my pride. What did I do? You forced me to think. That almost made me laugh. Tragic, I murmured. His fingers shifted slightly, thumb resting over the place where my pulse fluttered. You stopped chasing, he said. And I realized I didn't want you gone. The honesty in that nearly undid me. You're certain? I asked. Yes. Not because I'm convenient. No. Not because I'm powerful. No. Not because you want to win. His gaze sharpened, but not angrily. I don't want to win, he said quietly. I want you. The simplicity of it stole my breath for a moment. No speeches, no grand dominance, just that. I stepped closer on my own this time, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him through layers of fabric. "If you mark me," I said softly, "it's because I choose it to." His hand moved to my waist, steady and grounding. "Then choose." Silence stretched. This was the point of no return. In the original story, Lucien begged for this moment. Now, I tilted my head slightly, not in surrender, but in consent. "I choose," I said. Cassian didn't rush. He didn't overwhelm. When his teeth pressed into my neck, it wasn't violent. It was deliberate. A sharp breath, a pulse of heat, then something deeper settling beneath my skin, warm and steady, like a door clicking shut against a storm. When he pulled back, he didn't look triumphant. He looked relieved, and that, more than anything, made this real. No redemption arc, no tragic obsession, just two people making a decision that would change everything, because they wanted to. The first thing I noticed wasn't the bond. It was the quiet. Cassian didn't step back immediately. He didn't look victorious. He didn't even look particularly dominant. He just rested his forehead lightly against mine and exhaled, as if he'd been holding that breath for days. The mark at my neck throbbed faintly, not painfully, just warm. A subtle awareness beneath my skin, like something had settled into place. "You all right?" he asked, not commanding, not possessive, just checking. "Yes," I answered honestly. And I was. There was no panic, no sense of being trapped. If anything, the strange tension that had followed us for weeks felt quieter, more defined. He pulled back just enough to look at me properly. His hand remained at my waist, not gripping, simply there. "We don't have to announce it tonight," he said. I studied him. "You're considering shielding me. I'm considering timing." That almost made me smile. "The capital will notice by morning," I said. "You know that." "Yes, and they'll talk. They already do." This wasn't about gossip. We both knew that. It was about power. Marking me publicly aligned the Ardent name with mine in a way no contract ever could. It removed speculation. It ended the narrative of hesitation. But it also tied him to whatever storms followed me. "You've made yourself easier to target," I said quietly. His gaze didn't waver. "We." That word did something strange to my chest. "We." Not you. Not me. "We." I stepped back slightly, testing the bond and felt it respond. Not tugging. Not demanding. Just aware. A thread. Subtle but present. Cassian watched my expression carefully. Too much. "No," I admitted. "It's steady." He nodded once, as if that mattered more than anything else tonight. In the original story, Lucien's marking had been desperate. A final grasp at someone slipping away. This felt different. This felt chosen. I walked toward the window, needing a second to think. The estate grounds stretched out below, calm and dimly lit. "Your council won't be pleased," I said. "They rarely are." "And Alien." A pause. "Will recover." There was no cruelty in his tone. No indifference either. Just certainty. I turned back toward him. "I won't hide," I said. "If they challenge this, I'll stand beside you, not behind. I expect you to." "I mean it." "So do I." His voice wasn't sharp. It was almost approving. A strange warmth bloomed under my ribs that had nothing to do with the mark. "Lucien," he said quietly. I looked at him. "I didn't do this to silence the capital. I know. I did it because I was tired of pretending I could stay neutral." That honesty hit harder than any grand declaration. "You don't strike me as neutral," I murmured. I was trying to be careful. "And now I'm committed. Not possessive, not territorial. Committed." The difference mattered. I stepped closer again, closing the small space between us. "This doesn't make me smaller," I said softly. "It doesn't," he agreed. "If anything, it makes us louder." A faint huff of amusement escaped him. "You were always loud." "Strategically," I corrected. His hand slid from my waist to my hand instead, fingers intertwining with mine. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't heated. It was simple. "I don't regret it," he said. "Good," I replied, "because neither do I." The bond warmed slightly again, not flaring, not overwhelming, just steady. For the first time since waking up in this world, I didn't feel like I was fighting the story. I felt like I had stepped outside of it. Not the villain, not the desperate Omega, just someone who made a choice and was chosen back. The capital moved fast. By morning, the whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were statements. The Ardent heir has marked Lucien Vale. The villain Omega secured the crown. A political maneuver. A reckless indulgence. By noon, the council demanded an appearance. Cassian stood beside me in the grand hall. Not ahead of me, not shielding me. Beside me, the mark at my neck was visible. I hadn't hidden it. Let them see. An elder councilman stepped forward, voice sharp. "Is this official?" Cassian didn't hesitate. "Yes." Might we ask when this decision was made? Last night. Murmurs rippled across the chamber, and the reasoning. Silence stretched. This was the moment where, in the novel, Lucien would have stood stiff and silent while Cassian framed it as strategic alliance. Instead, I stepped forward. Gasps followed. We decided, I said evenly. The hall stilled. This is not a political patchwork, not a rushed consolidation. If you are concerned about stability, look at the trade reports from yesterday. Several council members stiffened. House Vale is profitable, compliant, growing. The only instability here is your discomfort. A few sharp inhales. Cassian didn't interrupt. He let me speak. And if your concern is emotional impulsivity, I continued calmly, I assure you, no one in this room is more cautious than the man standing beside me. A faint ripple of restrained amusement moved through the hall. The elder councilman's lips thinned. And what of precedent? Cassian finally spoke. The precedent, he said evenly, is that I will not conduct my personal life by committee. That did it. Shock, offense, power, explosive. But neither of us raised our voices. Neither of us lost composure. We didn't need to. The message was clear. We were not asking. The confrontation lasted another hour. By the end of it, no one could openly challenge us without admitting their motives weren't about governance. We left the hall still standing side by side. Powerful. That night, the estate was quiet. No council, no politics, just the soft hum of evening air through open windows. I sat on the edge of the bed, fingers brushing lightly over the mark at my neck. It no longer throbbed. It simply existed. Cassian entered the room without ceremony, removing his jacket and setting it aside. Tired? He asked. Not physically. He nodded once, understanding without explanation. He crossed the room and sat beside me. Not crowding, just present. They'll adjust, he said. They'll calculate. That too. Silence settled comfortable this time. No tension, no uncertainty, just shared space. After a moment, his hand reached for mine again. Not to assert, not to claim, just to hold. You were impressive today, he said quietly. You let me speak. I trust you. That warmth again deeper now. More personal than political. You don't regret it? I asked. No. Even after the council's reaction, I expected worse. A faint smile tugged at my mouth. I meant this. His grip tightened slightly. I don't regret choosing you. Not dramatic, not poetic, just true. I leaned back slowly, resting against him. His arm came around my waist naturally, steady and protective without being restrictive. For the first time since waking in this world, I wasn't maneuvering. I wasn't calculating. I wasn't rewriting a doomed narrative. I was simply here, chosen, choosing. The Villainomega was supposed to claw his way into relevance. Instead, I stood openly in the capital's grand hall. I spoke without fear. I was marked without desperation. And I was held without doubt. The story hadn't saved me. I stepped out of it and built something better. With him, soft, powerful, explosive, and finished. The capital did not collapse overnight, which was mildly disappointing. I woke to sunlight spilling across the sheets and the steady warmth of an arm around my waist. For a moment, I didn't move. Cassian rarely slept deeply. He was usually awake before dawn, already thinking 5 moves ahead of everyone else. Today, he was still asleep. His breathing was slow, even. One hand rested loosely against my stomach, fingers relaxed. Not possessive, just there. I shifted slightly, testing the bond out of habit. It responded with a faint warmth, like it always did now. Familiar, quiet, not overwhelming, just constant. His grip tightened slightly when I moved. Don't, he murmured, eyes still closed. I blinked. You're awake. Unfortunately, you're holding me hostage. You chose this. That was political, I said solemnly. A pause. Then, against my shoulder, I felt the smallest hint of a smile. Liar. I turned carefully in his arms until we were face to face. His hair was slightly disheveled, something the capital would never be allowed to witness. You're staring, he said. You look less intimidating horizontal. Careful. What will you do? I asked lightly. Mark me twice. His brow lifted. Don't tempt me. I laughed, actual laughter. Not the calculated kind I used in court halls and negotiations. It felt strange. Good. For weeks, everything between us had been tension and restraint, strategy layered over attraction. Now, there was no audience, no stakes, just warmth beneath the blankets and morning light across his skin. His fingers traced absent circles against my waist, not heated, not urgent, thoughtless, domestic. Your council sent 3 messages already, I said. I'm aware. You haven't read them. I'm aware. And yet you're still here. His gaze sharpened slightly, but not with irritation. Let them wait. That alone might have been the most shocking thing he'd ever said. The world won't implode if you're late to breakfast, I murmured. It might, he replied dryly. But I trust you'd manage the fallout. I would. I know. There it was again. Trust. Not because I was useful. Not because I was powerful. Just because I was me. I reached up and brushed my fingers lightly over the mark at my neck. It had healed cleanly, barely tender now. Cassian's eyes followed the motion. Does it still hurt? He asked. No. He studied me for another second, as if verifying the truth himself. Satisfied, he leaned forward and pressed a slow, warm kiss just beneath the mark. Not claiming, just affectionate. My breath caught anyway. Cassian, I warned softly. Yes, we are supposed to be dignified rulers. He kissed the corner of my mouth this time, then stopped smiling like that. I am not smiling. You are. I tried to scowl. He looked entirely unconvinced. Outside, somewhere beyond the estate walls, the capital was undoubtedly buzzing, strategizing, reacting. But here, it was quiet, warm, unremarkable in the best possible way. He pulled me closer again, resting his chin lightly atop my head. No meetings before noon, he said. That's irresponsible. Correct. And breakfast. In bed. I tilted my head back to look at him. You're becoming soft. Only privately. I smiled and this time didn't deny it. The Villainomega was supposed to fight for scraps of affection. Instead, I woke up wrapped in it. No audience. No drama. Just the steady weight of someone who chose me. And stayed.